Oh, the glory, the beauty, the majesty of music and the great Northwest. The mountains, the ocean, the rivers and streams, the wondrous sound of organ and brass. But this isn't about music. This is about Gordon Finch, who loved the Northwest and lived music. Gordon was a man who believed in the... But we're getting ahead of ourselves here because it was the very height of the Depression. 25% unemployment. It was April 1932 when Sonny, as his family called him, first saw the light of day in the communities of Melton and Freewater of eastern Oregon. With the beauty of the Blue Mountains behind them, the abundant water, rich fertile soil, and surrounded by fragrant orchards and lush wheat fields, it was still a tough beginning. Frank, Gordon's dad, had been working since he was 16 at the Milton Box Factory where they made wooden boxes for the fruits and vegetables of the area, and that's where he met Lifa. Her parents, Grandma and Grandpa Lang, had left Milton and moved to the Oregon coast. And in a few months, Frank and Lifa and baby Sonny packed up and left to join them, hoping for a better income for the new family. They moved to an area of the Coast Range around Toledo and Newport. Toledo was a center of Oregon's logging explosion. It was an area of fir, cedar, hemlock, and mature Sitka spruce that milled into the finest top-grade lumber. And Gordon's dad got a job at the C.D. Johnson Mill, the largest spruce mill in the world. Gordon was growing up in a tough, primitive area where even the Roosevelt Highway, today's 101, had sections paved with wood planks. The 30s was a difficult decade for Oregon's timber workers. The Depression was deepening and logging and sawmill jobs hard to find. Employment declined by more than 60% and wages fell even faster. Living conditions substandard. Camps were home to thousands of men, women, and children. And in 1935, about half of the timber workers went on strike because of the living conditions. The Great Depression was taking a toll on Oregon. Not too many months later, in the Taft Ocean Lake area, known today as Lincoln City, Gordon got a new baby brother, Lee. Up at their home in Harlan, just up the river from the mill, the extended family of aunts and uncles and grandparents had settled in, waiting out the Depression. It was by a wide bend in the river with plenty of wood for cooking and heat. There was fertile soil where they could plant a garden, room for sheep and cows and chickens for all the milk, cream, and eggs they needed. And here, the women and children were in a more stable, secure, peaceful environment. Mom played the piano, Dad the accordion or trumpet, and everyone sang old favorites. There was time for a few laughs, listening to the stories of Grandma and Grandpa Lang, or Uncles Ray, Lee, or Scotty. And Gordon's Grandpa Finch, who was along in years now, had been an excellent horseman, rode shotgun on the stagecoaches, and knew firsthand many of the men and stories of the Old West, and he was a great storyteller. Gordon's dad and Grandpa Lang were always fixing and building something, and Gordon watched, learning and absorbing that education of mathematical and mechanical skills. Well, almost he did anyway. One day he wanted to try out these skills and build a boat. No, not that kind, a toy boat. And he was using an axe to chop a piece of wood for the hull, and yep, he missed. He almost amputated his thumb. So much for Gordon trying to emulate Grandpa and Dad. And he got another education when Grandma Lang became his first firearms instructor. Really. A few years passed, and the brothers had moved on to other jobs. Frank and Lifa, along with Grandpa Finch, moved down the river to Toledo. In the midst of the Great Depression, Oregon was grading and paving that old Roosevelt Highway, Highway 101, and the WPA was building 5 stunning bridges on the Oregon coast. And Gordon, Lee, Mom, and Dad watched with interest the building of the big Newport Bridge. Gordon's mom had filled in as a teacher at a local school in spite of her 10th grade education. But for Mom, that meant summers at Walla Walla and other schools to continue her education. And for Gordon and Lee, a summer back in Harlan with Grandma. Here's one of the letters that Gordon wrote telling about his daily activities. Dear Mother, yesterday Leray and I planted our gardens. I planted 2 rows of carrots, 2 rows of red beets, 1 row of lettuce, 1 row of peas, 11 hills of bush beans, 1 of pole lima beans, and 2 rows of potatoes. Leray has about the same thing in his garden. How are you getting along in your lessons? I'm reading 5 pages a day in the book The Great Controversy, and Leray is doing 1 page a day in his arithmetic. Yesterday, Leray and I decided to make a raft. I had mine about half made when Grandma called us for bed, so I had to finish it this morning. I haven't fell in yet. Oceans of Love, Gordon. Yes, Gordon had planted his own garden, grew to love milk, and forever was a man most content with simple foods. As the boys started school, Mom was determined that they receive a Christian education, wherever it might be. One day, Gordon was riding his bike to school in Roseburg when he was hit by a pickup truck and sustained a serious concussion. He was rushed to the Portland Sand, where he remained for weeks. It was a serious accident, and he fell behind a whole year of school. They moved on to other small towns where Mom could teach and they could get that education she wanted them to have. From Dallas and Falls City on up to Scappoose and St. Helens. But it was while he was in school at St. Helens that he met a dedicated teacher, Fred Wilbur, that had a great impact on his life. It was more than just academics. It was how a teacher could influence a student's life. And Gordon took it to heart as later he became a caring, loving, dedicated teacher himself. We move ahead here and find Gordon, Leray, and Mom at Columbia Academy near Battleground, Washington. It was his junior year, and he had a new interest. He'd always loved music, especially during summer camp meetings at Gladstone, but this was different. He was 17, it was 1949, and it was the smooth sounds of Tommy Dorsey's trombone. Yes, it was good. But he and brother Leray had to share their rented trombone. He persisted, practiced often, and eventually took sole possession. Gordon was a late starter, but he bucked the odds. He took trombone lessons his senior year. You see, Gordon was going to be a musician. Well, maybe he was. Because you see, when you go to college as a music major, they kind of expect that you have some experience, and they weren't about to accept this brand new trombone player into the program. But if you knew Gordon, you know that to him, that was just a minor obstacle to overcome. And a few years later, he did have his music degree. Gordon was a man who knew what he wanted. He was committed to that end. But Gordon wasn't just a budding musician either. He was also known for his baseball expertise, pitching numerous no-hitters. He wrote his dad, "Yesterday I pitched a no-hitter. The score was 10-0. That makes my 7th win this season with no losses." And this was during the baseball season of his freshman year. He also enjoyed a game of tennis and golf. He enjoyed playing sports with other students, faculty members, and friends. And surprisingly, he climbed a Mount Hood twice during his teenage years. Once wasn't enough for Gordon. Even in the 50s, college was expensive. But remember, Gordon was determined that meant summer jobs of what he knew. Logging. He was a whistle punk, choker setter, chaser. He drove a log carrier and forklift. Gordon just had that ability. And the surroundings, well, the Northwest became more deeply important to him as he found beauty and peace in the Oregon coast, the flowers, the mountains, valleys, trees, rivers, and streams. On campus, he was known as a trombonist. He was also the student conductor of the college band. He completed his student teaching and then during his senior year, traveled down to Pendleton as a paid teacher. In 1956, he graduated with that Bachelor of Arts in Music Education. What Gordon wanted, he got, almost.